Well, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Reverend Steve Van Meter, your senior minister, and happy St. Patrick's Day, right? Well, we have quite a treat for you this morning. We have something a little different, and I think you'll be rather pleased, so enjoy. And Reverend Dr. Guy Williams discovered religious science in the 1990s at Reverend Dr. Kathy Hearn's Pacific Church of Religious Science. He became a licensed practitioner of religious science in 1997. He later co-founded the Midtown Church of Religious Science with Reverend Kevin Busey, and Reverend Guy Williams graduated from ministerial school in 2005, and he became and continues to be the spiritual director of Hilltop Center for Spiritual Living in Fallbrook, California. He also became the spiritual director of Corazon Global in Tijuana, Mexico in 2013, and has been instrumental in the growth and development of religious science teaching in Mexico. He is a highly acclaimed speaker and teacher. He also teaches metaphysical Bible and historical philosophy at the Centers for Spiritual Living School of Spiritual Leadership. Reverend Dr. Guy lives in Fallbrook, California with his life partner, Andrea, and their beloved cat and dog, Sandals and Nikolai. And I'll tell you that he has just been given an honorary doctorate from our organization, Centers for Spiritual Living. So, which they don't just hand these things out. You have to earn it, and he has done his work. And you know, when you're on purpose and you're doing your work, life honors you. And we are so honored today. I'll tell you that Reverend Guy and I go back a little ways, and we just have a real good, you'll just love him. He spent the day with us yesterday, our practitioner corps, and all I can say is, don't even try to take notes, just buy the CD, okay? Because there's that much information, and without further ado, Reverend Dr. Guy Williams.
My brother. Welcome.
Enjoy.
Thank you. Good morning. And I guess they say Erin go bra. Today is St. Patrick's Day, and I want to acknowledge that I'm not wearing green. When I was a young boy in grade school, the tradition was that if you didn't wear green, you got pinched. And I still hope. So first of all, I want to send greetings from our sister community, my sister community, the Hilltop Center for Spiritual Living in Fallbrook, California. Fallbrook is a lovely town, very much like Grants Pass. It's kind of an agricultural community, and it's lovely and wonderful people, and some of those wonderful people, if I can just give you a flavor of that, are former members of our community, current members of your community, which are Pat and Diane Salter, and can't tell you how my heart grew seeing them this morning. I also want to thank the practitioners and Howard and Sherry for this incredible hospitality and welcoming I've had. It's been a real joy. So with that, the title of my talk is A New Look at an Old Thought That Used to Be a New Thought. And I want to play and massage that thought as we go through my whatever it is I'm doing here this morning, talking at this point, rambling actually. But I want to start it by considering a few things, because really what I want to talk about is I want to talk about butterflies. I want to talk about a first century homeless Palestinian whose teachings I adore and follow. I want to talk about Ivanka Trump. And to begin the conversation, what I'd like to talk about is this. What do Al Gore and Steve Bannon have in common? So I want to speak to both sides of the aisle here. What do Steve Bannon and Al Gore have in common? So I'll tell you. Both of them are students of two historians by the name of William Strauss and Neil Howey, who in 1997 wrote a book called The Fourth Turning. Now, I'm not going to go too far into what the book is, but the general synopsis is this. They work in something that is an old Etruscan term called a saculeum, which is a period of time. And what they have done as historians is they chart cycles, times, seasons, years, cycles. And particularly within this country and how this country affects other nations and how we are as a global community, what they see is there are these, what they call turnings. And there's 4 turnings within each one of these saculeums. And in them, they can chart and show social and economic, spiritual shifts, changes, upheavals, degenerations, and movement again. And both Al Gore and Steve Bannon are curious about this, as many people are, because what they believe, what seems to be apparent, is that we are moving into what's called a fourth turning, which is a time of tremendous upheaval, a breakdown of many components of what a culture and society is, and a reinvention of how these things go. And I think that we see that evident in so many things around us. We see that already happening within our economic spheres, our political spheres, our social spheres. As a minister, what I do is I see this also happening in spiritual centers and communities of all denominations around the world. We see that there's a paradigm shift that is happening. It is moving in a direction where how we know what spiritual community is changing before our very eyes. And so the question is, how do we navigate through that? Now, as New Thought practitioners, one of the things that we believe is this. We believe that thoughts are causative, that who and what we think about begins to set the trajectory of both our conscious mind and our unconscious mind, and draws to us and brings forth from us shifts and changes in our conditions. So, thoughts are causative, but the real question is, who controls our thoughts? And I think that's the thing that's going to be very interesting as we find ourselves navigating in these times. Ivanka Trump says something that I think is salient to the point. She says, if someone perceives something is true, it's more important than if the fact were true. If we perceive something to be true, it is more important than if the fact is true. George Orwell said it a very different way, but on point, where he says, those who control the present control the future, and those who control the past control the present. So the question is, where are our thoughts being influenced from, and how do we navigate our way in this? One of the things that I'm really excited about is how our organization, Centers for Spiritual Living, is looking at how we move forward into the future, how we prepare ourselves. And what I want to say is there's some very good leadership. Last week was our leadership conference, and very interestingly, it was done online. So it was a virtual conference. So we were able to see speakers from Canada and Atlanta and in Encinitas, which is very close to my house. And so it was really interesting, and I have to say, even inspiring for me, as I see how we are beginning to prepare. And I want to offer some ideas that I got from Dr. Ken Gordon, who is the spiritual leader of our community. And he was speaking in Calgary, and he was talking about change, and he was talking about it from a little different angle than I am. But what he said is that, whether that change is personal, whether it's happening to us as an individual, whether it's happening to us as a community, as a nation, as a species, or wherever it is, how we navigate through that. And he offered 5 things to keep in mind, and I want to share those with you, if I may, from my own flavor. So he says the first thing is when we are going through change, when something is up, is to stay open. To stay open. Rabbi Abraham Heschel, who was a Jewish theologian and philosopher and friend and colleague of Dr. Martin Luther King, said it this way. He says that there are 2 ways of knowing. There is reason. And reason is how we take the information that we have and systematize it in such a way that we get an idea that we can follow through. But he says there's another way of knowing, and that is through wonder. And because wonder or surprise brings us to amazement, and amazement brings us to awe, and awe brings us to insight. So a way of attracting insight into our life is to allow ourselves to be surprised, to enter into an experience of amazement. One of the great philosophers of New Thought was a man by the name of Ralph Waldo Emerson. And Emerson spoke about how being in nature sort of removes a lot of the constraints that we have on ourselves, and we're able to move to a place of wonder, of amazement. Have you ever had those experiences where something just surprises you and it shifts and changes everything? Again, what Heschel would say is that we should allow ourselves to be surprised every day. And if you are not surprised every day, who's controlling your thoughts? Who is telling you that things are just the way they are and they never change? The other thing about staying open is we begin to perceive things differently. We begin to perceive the universe. In fact, as a teacher, the first question I ask my students, or if someone comes to me for counseling, the first question that I ask them is this: what kind of universe do you live in? Do you live in a universe that is intelligent and good and beneficent? Do you live in a universe that is inert and without thought, without volition, without direction? Do you live in a universe that is malefic, that is unwinding and does not work for the good, but actually works for the less than good? Because how that question is answered, I will offer, determines the trajectory of your life. What kind of universe do you live in? And so here's the thing, is, in Waldman's book, How God Changes the Brain, there has been amazing research in brain science and how the brain operates. And one of the things that we know is that when we think from a level of possibility, when we are open to a sense of goodness, when we have a sense to embrace things from a positive possibility time, what happens in the brain is real estate begins to be open in there that had been closed down. Lights get turned on. Possibilities begin to show. Again, as Emerson says, doors begin to open where theretofore no doors even appeared. So keeping an open, engaged attitude of how we see the world and see the world is naturally good and that it's working in our favor begins to shift how our consciousness operates. And again, consciousness, maybe I should back up because we all use that and no one really knows what we're talking about. So for this conversation, when I mean consciousness, what I mean is what we pay attention to, what we attend to, and at a deeper level, our own introspection. So when our introspection and what we are paying attention to is to those things that work and that are possible and positive, it begins to navigate us in such a way that we begin to move towards that good. Second point that he said is this, is that we should remember we're not alone. We're not alone. That we are part of something greater than ourselves, that we are given opportunities to give and receive love. And whether that comes from a social consciousness or a quantum consciousness, we understand that we are part of something greater than ourselves and that we influence things that are around us. In the early 20th century, as quantum physics was beginning to develop itself and understand itself, there was a term that came up that was called holons. And I love this term because what a holon is, it's something complete within itself and part of something greater than itself. An example, an atom is complete within itself, but part of something greater than itself called a molecule. And a molecule is complete within itself, but part of something greater than itself called a cell, an organ, an animal, a species, a community, a planet, a solar system, a galaxy, and the universe in belong. What we begin to understand, what quantum science is teaching us, is that we live in a relational universe where everything is interconnected to everything else, and there is great truth that when a butterfly flaps its wings someplace, it's affecting things everywhere, subtle as it may be. But in that sense, we are not alone. And we are constantly given opportunities to give and receive love, to be of support and to receive support, to compensate and to be compensated. And so again, as we navigate in these interesting times, we do so with a sense that we're not alone. The third concept is this, is to have a vision. To have a vision. You know, the ancient Hebrews understood this in one of their books called Proverbs, 29 for those who can count. It says this, if a people have no vision, they will perish. What directs you? You know, there is an echo in our soul, an urge, a desire in each of us. And it is so important that we attend to this. Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, used to say when students came to him and asked him, what should I do? He always said, follow your bliss. And so our bliss, our vision, that thing that navigates us, the good that we want. And you know what I know is it's good to have several visions. It's good to have several things that pull us. It's good to be motivated toward these things. It stimulates us. It gives us a sense of purpose. It gives us a sense of direction. And then it begins to pull to us resources available to organize ourselves to those things. The fourth thing that he offers is this, gratefulness. Gratefulness. To live our life with a sense of gratefulness. Diane Butler Bass, in her book Gratefulness, talks about how we begin to live our life with the acknowledgement that it's a gift. That it's a gift. And not only is life a gift, but if we understand that life is a gift, then it naturally directs us to the attention that if it is a gift, there is a giver of that gift. And so it connects us to something bigger and greater and more loving to ourself. And so it expands us, it opens us, it keeps us in that place. And the fifth thing that he says is to let go, is to surrender. Have you ever noticed that when you finally decide to stop banging your head against the wall about one thing or another, and you just back off for it, that things start working out? Direction starts coming to us. We start getting information that because we are holding on to how things are supposed to be, as opposed to how they're wanting to unfold. And if we can get out of the way about our idea, you know, here's the thing, isn't it? Is if you've ever noticed anybody, and probably doesn't count anybody in this room, but have you ever known a control freak? The thing about control freaks is what they are affirming is chaos. right? Because they feel they've got a hold, it's their right, proper Christian duty to manipulate and control and harass everybody and everything around them, because if it didn't do it, oh my God, there would be, fluoride in the water and communists in the streets, and who knows what would happen. So they got to hold this whole thing together. But what if something comes out, even of the chaos, and if we let it go, it begins to happen? So another person that spoke at this virtual conference was Dr. Roger Thiel, who is retiring after 25 years at Mile High Center for Spiritual Living in Denver, Colorado. And he talked about he was in Encinitas, so I was able to actually see him in person. He talked about butterflies and how butterflies, they go through this caterpillar stage and then they go through the butterfly stage. And I thought that was interesting, and it was inspiring, and it's sort of like a greeting card kind of thing, but it was kind of cool. But then, living in Fallbrook, where I do, we have had this massive influx of painted lady butterflies. I mean, they're like clouds. It's one of the most amazing migrations I have ever seen. And so it got me thinking, okay, he's talking about butterflies, and I'm seeing butterflies literally everywhere I look. What is it about butterflies? And so, in this warehouse of useless information, I decided to cram some more stuff in and started studying about butterflies. And here's what's really amazing, and you probably know this, but I just think this is incredible. So 2 things. One is that a caterpillar goes about being a caterpillar, doing what it does. And what caterpillars do is they simply take advantage of the environment they're in, and they eat, and they eat, and they eat, and they do this. And then what happens is they arrive at something called, and I love this term, critical unworkability. Right? Critical unworkability, which essentially means that what I'm doing is no longer working, and now it's moving into a crisis, and so something is going to have to change. And what the butterfly does, or what the caterpillar does, is it creates this thing called a cocoon, and it goes into this thing called a pupa. I think that's how it's pronounced. And this is just amazing to me. The entire caterpillar dissolves. It's not like a chicken, the egg kind of thing where something's kind of growing. It dissolves. It dissolves into this kind of soup of protein. And anything that the caterpillar was is gone, and all you have is this protein source. But something happens in this. There are cells within the caterpillar. Get this. They're called imaginal cells. Imaginal cells. So when the crisis kicks in, the imaginal cells become activated. And in that sense, the power of the imagination, these imaginal cells begin to restructure and reorganize. And out of chaos is birthed a butterfly. Out of this simple protein soup comes this absolutely new thing. And again, the ancient Hebrews understood this, where they talk about it is in the chaos that creation happens. It's in the crisis that birth occurs. It's when things aren't working that a new way of them to work begins to happen. And oh, by the way, if you haven't gotten it, and I'm hoping that the practitioners I spent time with yesterday understand that what I have been talking about are the 5 steps of affirmative prayer. Right? So, when we are in critical unworkability, you might consider allowing yourself to induce a sense of amazement, of wonder, of awe, recognizing that there is a power and a presence that is permeating all things, that there is this thing called life that lives in and through and as all things, and that it yearns and desires for a more complete and full expression of what it is in all things, and it's evolving and drawing to it. And we move into a sense of wonder and amazement as we realize we are part of that thing. We are part of this life. We are part of this experience. We're part of this evolutionary process. And that we're not alone, that we're included in and being drawn with it. And being in that state of consciousness, we shift our attention to what isn't, to what is possible. We open ourselves to that vision. And how we find that vision is we simply ask ourselves, what is the good in me that is yearning to find expression? Because the good that I am seeking is in truth seeking me. And I can say yes to this. I say yes to this with a sense of gratefulness, knowing that there is a giver of this gift. Knowing that things are moving to a place of good, knowing that no matter what the appearances may be, there is a force for good in the universe that is working for me. And I don't have to figure out how it's done. I simply let go and let the power of that imaginal force, that which was there at the very beginning of all things, that which is here in this moment now, that which is living and breathing in my life and all lives around me, that wisdom knows even what I don't know. And if I can trust that, all is well. You know, Ralph Waldo Emerson's prayer was, where I am, God is, and all is well. Where I am, God is, all is well. And so, we talked about butterflies. I talked a little bit about Von Trapp. I just wanted to tease you. We talked about our good. And we talked about the reality of this. We are living in an unfinished universe that is evolving. To where it goes, no one knows. No one knows. But where two or more are gathered with a level of intention, it shifts and changes the direction of all things. We have been invited to be co-creators in this incredible and amazing thing called life, in this amazing and wonderful planet we call home, in a spiraling, expanding universe where everything is interconnected to everything else. And if that doesn't amaze you, then pinch me. But before that, let us pray. And again, you know, two of my favorite authors, Ralph Waldo Emerson says, prayer is the contemplation of the facts of life from the highest point of view. Which, by the way, is the same thing as worry. Because what is worry? Worry is the contemplation of the facts of life from the worst case scenario, right? It's the same activity of mind, it's just directed to our good. Prayer is the contemplation of the facts of life from the highest point of view. So we enter into that, and Abraham Heschel says that prayer is opening a window into the kingdom of heaven. It says we allow our thoughts and our heart and our very being, that introspection within us, to contemplate the highest thing. It is this: there is life. There is life. And all life proceeds from that life. That which was there at the very beginning, and that which is now, and that which will always be, that divine presence. And what I know for everybody in this room, and quietly to yourself say this: I am God's beloved. I am God's beloved. That this presence created me. And again, as this first century Palestinian said, its eye is on the sparrow. Its eye is on me. Its love is on me. Its vested interest is that my life is expressed in the best possible way this life can be expressed. I am one with this. And I open myself to that good that is wanting to find expression, and I open myself knowing that the good that is for each person in this room, unique, original as it is theirs to have. And how grateful I am for this thing called life, for this experience, this weekend, for this community, for this opportunity, and for this world that we live in. And knowing it is not mine to do, but knowing that it is being done I release it into this infinite creative presence. I call it forth into being by saying, may it be so, and so it is. Thank you for your kind attention.